Now, this is unusual. The Israeli Defense Forces have just released footage of Israel's pre-dawn airstrikes against Iranian and Syrian military sites in southern Syria. The attack came in response to the discovery of a number of explosive devices that were planted in the Israeli Golan Heights, and the Syria State News Agency says that 3 military personnel have been killed and 1 has been wounded. The Israeli military claims that the IDF attacked 8 targets, including Iranian headquarters at the Damascus International Airport, a secret military site that has served as a hosting facility for senior Iranian delegations when they come to Syria to operate. Well, we have Binyamin Bentaleb joining us. He is joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. So first of all, Binyamin, explain what kinds of explosive devices were planted in the Israeli Golan Heights.
Well, great to be back with you. We know that Iran has trafficked a whole different series of munitions and, in fact, electro-optical devices to help make the rockets of its partners and Israel's adversaries in the region into missiles. But Iran is actually also trafficking ammunition as well as various kinds of explosives. So it's not clear the exact type of explosive, but basically anything that is combustible, anything that can go boom, that could be used by the Assad regime, that could be used by Palestinian terrorists, and most importantly, by Iran's most successful proxy, Lebanese Hezbollah. So Iran has used this supply route before, but moving them over into the Israeli part of the border is a very risk-tolerant move.
Now, this is certainly not the first time that Israel has struck Iranian targets in Syria and those of allied militias, including Lebanon's Hezbollah. How deeply entrenched is Iran in Syria, and why?
In many ways, you could say they're almost part and parcel of the Assad regime. Iran received critical support from the Syrian dictator's father, Hafez al-Assad, during the 1980-1988 Iran-Iraq War, and that helped to wed these two regimes together for a very long time. If there was no Syria, there would be no Lebanese Hezbollah today. As I recently said, Lebanese Hezbollah is Iran's most important and most successful proxy. And when the current Syrian dictator was embattled, Lebanese Hezbollah was the one who entered the battle space and helped win the day. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. Syria permits Iran to engage in these kind of offensive activities on its own soil, and that's why you've seen this steady uptick of IDF activities to try to roll back this Iranian encroachment in the Levant.
Well, it's interesting because it does seem that Israel has stepped up strikes in Syria this year, specifically against Iranian targets. Why do you think that's the case, and does it have anything to do with Washington, D.C.'s backing?
Well, it seems like Washington is okay with this because in many ways Washington has been derelict in finding a way to roll back Iran's activities in the region. When you survey the Middle East more broadly, Israel has been the most successful actor at impeding Iran's growth of assets, infrastructure, military capabilities, and select precision-guided munitions in places like Syria. So really, if Israel wasn't doing this, the Iranian threat would be multiple-fold in the Levant, whether that was in Syria or in Lebanon. Iran has what we like to call a land bridge connecting itself to Iraq, to Syria, to Lebanon. And it's across this bridge that key personnel, key men, and money actually travel. So Israel has been significantly stepping up its activities here, likely because Iran has been significantly trying to grow the capabilities of this land bridge.
Well, you know, it's certainly a rare move for the IDF to release footage of these Syria strikes. What kind of response could Israel expect to see, if anything?
Well, sometimes when Israel does tip its hand in relation to some of these strikes, the Iranians do back down for a while. But when they do try to respond, they respond and they fail, and they have to go back and lick their wounds. We saw this, I think, in a cycle in 2018 and once in 2019. But as Israel becomes more willing to show to the international community and not just to the region the military capabilities it has, as well as the need to have to do this because Iran keeps encroaching on Israel's borders, that should be much of an alarm bell.